Hi there, this is Mark Forte, Senior Solutions Specialist with Toon with an expertise in compositing. In this video, we'll take a look at the highlight node. The highlight node can be found in the combine section of your node library. You can either find it here or you can also just type it in the search bar to find it quickly. Click and drag the highlight node from the node library to the node view. Now let's take a look at the highlight node. You can see that it has two ports. One is for the image, one is for the matte. So these inputs are what we have to plug things into to dictate where the highlight's going to happen. The image is our character, and the matte is the region where we want to highlight. There's a couple ways you can plug this in. We can either drag down from the character and out of the highlight to the composite, or a faster way would be to hold down the Alt key or Command on a Mac and snap to the circuit. Once you have it locked in, we now need to determine where we're going to highlight this character. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. One is to actually create a drawing, connect it to the matte, and start to draw. So I'm going to go and pick a color from my palette. It doesn't really matter what color you pick, as we're just drawing a zone here. So I'm going to draw down the side of my character like so. And basically what's happening is the highlight is showing wherever we've drawn that zone. So if we render it, you can see we have a highlight in the exact zone that I've drawn. Now if you have an animated character, this can take a lot of time to animate frame by frame that zone. So there's a quick way we can do a offset highlight. Now back in the day, people used to duplicate the characters, which would double the amount of nodes inside the node view. This happens to be a single drawing, so it's not too complicated, but if you had a full cutout character, you would have a lot of information doubled up. Instead of duplicating the character, what we can do is we can do an offset of the character by instancing him, essentially. So let's go down to the Move section, and we're going to drag in the Apply Peg transformation. What this node does is it takes whatever input you give it, such as the character, and it's going to output a second instance of that character down to the comp. So it's still the exact original hierarchy going all the way down. Now we have a second instance instead of having duplicated the entire character. Now we don't see a difference in OpenGL because we have both characters one on top of one another. So what we need is a peg. So we're going to drag the peg in and we're going to connect it to the leftmost port for the transformation. Then using my Move tool, I'm just going to slide offset this. So you can see that I have two characters now. One is the original and the other is the offset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this, and now the character's back on top. The idea is that we want to take this character and slide it down ever so slightly so that it leaves a sliver of a rim light that we can use. So visually, I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to grab my Move tool, and using the peg, I'm just going to shift that down vertically a little bit. So you can see that we're leaving a difference between the two characters. Now this doesn't look great right now. What we want is to plug it into the highlight module. The highlight module by default is told to show wherever the information comes from. So if we have plugged in a shape, it's going to highlight that shape. We actually want the reverse of this. So there's two ways you can reverse it. You can either open the layer properties and choose invert matte. You could also double click this, which will invert the matte, and that'll give you the rim light result. If we render this, you can see the rim light. Alternatively, you could also do a normal highlight and use a cutter. So if we basically take the character and cut it by the offset, we're left with that rim light. If I take this straight to the display, you can see that we're left with the information. So doing it this way gives you a little bit more control if you needed to separate things with other cutters, but there's always, you could still do it with the regular highlight inverted. So now that we have this highlight, we might want to color it so that it looks nice next to the flames next to it. So we can click in here and we can make the blur of the highlight 0 so that it's hard edge, or we can make it even bigger so that it's very soft. And then we can pick a color by clicking on the color down here. And let's go to something like a yellow orange And now we can see we have a very nice highlight that's kind of taking the colors of the flames that are surrounding him. Another thing you could do is click on multiplicative. So this is called a normal additive highlight, but what we might want to do is a multiplicative one. And if we click this, you'll notice that it instantly goes blue. In order to explain this, we're going to need a color wheel. So there's a color wheel, and you can see that we used to have an orange-yellow, but now we have a blue. Basically, multiplicative takes the opposite end of the color spectrum. So if we wanted a green highlight, we'd actually need to pick a red. If we wanted a purple, we'd need to pick the yellow. So since we actually want that original color, we'll just pick a blue on the other side instead. I'm going to slide the hue from orange-yellow over to the blue. And now you can see we have a nice lighting setup. The difference between a multiplicative and a normal mode is that multiplicative is a blend mode that will blend to the brighter pixels and retain the dark outlines, which looks more like natural light is hitting our character. Additive mode, which I'll switch to now, is more like a color on top of everything. So you have to decide what look you're going for. And I'm going to switch this one back to multiplicative because I like this look. It might be a little more intense, so you could play with your alpha to reduce it, but it gives you a very nice lighting setup and gives you ideas of how you could treat characters to be highlighted in certain environments.